Waters. Welcome to this week's episode 40 Watt Podcast. This week I had the distinct pleasure to have Joe Halliday from Hello Sailor Effects on the podcast. Joe has a really unique story as to how he got into building guitar pedals, how he got into the English Navy, and how that may have saved his life, and how making pedals now continues to bring him joy. And if you haven't seen Hello Sailor Effects, they're bespoke, beautiful pieces of art. They're very unique, and I love what Joe is making over there. But before you dive into this episode, we're going to talk about a couple of sponsors of this episode. First of all, I want to thank Barry from Grez Guitars. Barry just launched officially the Grand Tour bass. You can see videos of it over on his YouTube and his Instagram. Both are linked below. It is a spectacular instrument. It's very pricey, but I think it's worth it. If you're a bassist, this is the don't miss hollow body bass. But I understand it's a lot of money. Barry also makes the Mendocino, which I have the Mendocino as a baritone, and I think it's one of the coolest guitars I've ever played. Go check him out. Go look at what Barry's making. Follow him on Instagram and on YouTube. Also want to thank sponsor Summer School Electronics. Mark over at Summer School is making extremely cool pedals. He's got a bunch of cool things in the works that y'all need to be keeping an eye out for. But go check out his website. All that stuff's below. And lastly, want to thank sponsor this podcast, Maris Pedals. Angela, Terry, Gina, they're making some of the coolest, most innovative effects on the market. The Mercury X has completely changed how I look at reverb pedals, and it is the one for me. It is the ultimate reverb pedal. It does super simple, basic reverbs, and it does the most ambient, ethereal, cool sounding effects on the planet. You got to go check them out. If you're not hip to Maris Pedals, go click the links below and tell them I sent you. In the meantime, y'all, thanks so much for the support. Go over to patreon.com/40watt podcast. For $5 a month, you can help keep this show going. It means an awful lot to me. You get an extra episode every time I record with anybody. Also, there's going to be some other perks I'm going to start throwing over there. I've been saying I'm going to toss some backing tracks over there for the last couple of weeks, and I need to just get those mixed down and get those over there. There's going to be some other stuff coming up. If you don't want to get on Patreon, you need to save some money, totally understand. Share the podcast, leave a subscribe on YouTube, follow on your podcast player, share with a friend, leave a rating or review or a comment or something. It helps promote the show and find new listeners and viewers. That's enough. We're going to get on to the show. Hope you enjoy this episode with Joe from Hello Sailor Effects. 40 Watters, welcome to this week's episode, 40 Watt Podcast. My name is Philip. I'm your host. You've already heard all the stuff at the beginning about sponsors and Patreon and all of that and all the cool stuff that's happening on the back end. I do want to welcome you to the first episode in a couple of weeks. Last week was my day job. We had a fundraiser, went great, had a good time with that. But of course, I didn't get a podcast out that week. So hopefully we're going to make up for it this week. You've already seen the title. You already know what's going on here. This week, I'm very, very excited to be joined by Joe from Hello Sailor Effects. Joe, how are you, sir?
Oh, I'm living the dream, mate. Loving it. Loving life.
I love it. Joe, so you're a brand and just a fella that I learned about through, like so many, through that pedal show. Not just because you've had some stuff on there and they mention you, but on like the live streams, you're always in the chat and hanging out, and we're trading comments back and forth. And I remember getting really, really intrigued by what you're doing, because I think you have such a unique, interesting story into how you got into this. And I really feel like there's something interesting. I think listeners are going to really enjoy what you're doing, how you got into it. I told one person today that I had this interview. We were going to have this conversation, and he was a guitar player. He's not familiar with your brand, and I told him a little bit about how you got into building pedals, and he's like, "Okay, that's the coolest thing I've ever heard." I'm like, "Right." So
That's very kind of you to say.
Well, what's going to happen is I'm going to stop talking for a little bit, and let's go back. How'd you get into guitar? How'd you actually start building, and then talk about how that moved into a military career, which then moved back into more building?
Oh, so originally I tried to play guitar as a kid a couple of times. I never really got around to it. Mm-hmm. And then it never took off. I was like, pick it up, whatever, not learning, put it down. And then I got heavy into drugs, into the gangster. Like, my whole life's ambition, it sounds crazy to say now because I'm like 40 years old, and my wife and kids would never imagine me to be like this. But my life's ambition was to sign on what we call a dole, which would be your, I think you call it welfare over there.
Okay.
So my life's ambition was to get to 18, sign on a dole, the government to pay for a flat, like just an apartment or whatever, and maybe if I'm lucky, sell some drugs on the side, and that would be me set for life. Life's ambition.
Wow.
Insane. I mean,
yeah.
My mum now, bless her, still describes places, because I don't live at home. I live like the other end of the country. She'll still describe places to me like, do you remember when you stole that motorbike and got arrested there? Well, it's by there. And she'll explain, because it was so many times. Hundreds. To me, I mean, after 10 years in the military, I tried to join the police. I was going to leave, join the police, and they said, look, we've looked through your record. There's no violent crime, and there's no, like sexual, nothing like that. It was all just theft and drugs.
Yeah.
And so they said, you've got no problem. You can join the police. And then when I applied, Merseyside Police, my home police, actually said no because of the volume. Really, I could have put a claim in, but they were like, absolutely not. Not a chance. Go somewhere else. And so I stayed in the military. Yeah, it's mad to think now. But so anyway, when I was 17, I come home one day and my friend, his nickname was Squeak. This sounds, again, it all sounds like a surreal time in my life, but his name was Squeak and his brother was called Bubble and Squeak. It's a food over here. Don't ask. Bubble was a bit of a chunky guy like myself, and Squeak had a squeaky voice. Perfect. Anyway, he tried to join the military, tried to join the Navy. He lasted 3 weeks in training, and he did this thing called PVR. That means you can put your notice in and leave because you don't like it. And I said to him, why'd you do that? You've ruined your life, all of this. And he said, it's hard. You couldn't do it. And I said, I could. And he was like, no, you couldn't. So I went home that night and said to my mum, I'm joining the Navy. And she was like, what? You can't. And I was like, well, I am. And he said, well, you drug tested. I said, fine. Well, I'll sort that out. And I moved in with my cousin called, and I know she'll be watching this. Her name's Big Vicky. She's amazing. She took me in and sort of like weaned me off and took me out of that world, which then gave me the space to become a human, which I had no clue what I was doing wasn't normal, because if everyone's doing something, if every day you play football in school, you think that's normal to do, right? Well, I joined the military and I thought it was normal to steal a car on a Friday night or to set the park on fire and fight with the fire brigade. I thought that was what everyone did because that's what we did. It's insane.
Yeah, it's mad when you hear it like that.
And so anyway, I 6 months later went to the careers office with my mum in tow. And it just so happened my mum is like, her life kind of explains why I'm so eccentric. So she's a car mechanic. And then she moved into teaching in a college, car mechanics. And the guy who signed me up to the Navy used to be one of her students. So he's looking at this 17-year-old, clearly skinny fellow who looks like he's been through a bit, with me hands down my pants. And, like I look like what we would call a scally, so a criminal, 100% criminal. And he's gone, that's my old teacher. I'm going to help her out. And he pushed me through. Should have never got in. Never in a million years. And so I joined basic training. I'd never owned a pair of jeans because my hometown, you wear tracksuit bottoms or you get beat up for being posh. So I'd never owned a pair of jeans. I had to buy a pair to join the Navy. And I was just like, I was nothing like the other people there. And it become really apparent to me that I was like, the way I've been living my life was 100% wrong. And I was the weird one. And I kind of, like a switch flipped in my head. I did my basic training and I was like, okay, so I'm 17 and I've exceeded my life's ambition. What now? And then I just bought into the Navy heavy and I didn't even know I was going to be an engineer in the Navy. So my original plan was in my head. I was like, I'm going to pass out of training, know that I can do it, quit, and then go home to my mate and say, told you I could do it. How'd you like that?
And I felt like that's where you were going.
100%. And then by the time I finished basic training, I was like, this is amazing. I'm going to see the world. I'm going to do this. Look at all this money they're paying. I've never seen so much money. And I was like, this is amazing. So I stayed in. Then roughly about 3 years after joining, we were on deployment and people just started picking up the guitar on deployment, playing or what have you. We were out in the Gulf where they're throwing missiles around now. We were there and people are buying guitars and what have you. And I was like, do you know what? I'm going to give this another go. So I started learning. Then I got myself an electric guitar. I got an orange tiny tenor amp, and I started getting into it, and my amp broke while we were at sea, and I there's no way. Who's going to fix it? It's not like you're going to take it to a shop. And so I emailed around a few places in the ports we were going to. I think it was like £50 for someone to look at it. I was like, no chance, I'll do it myself. I'm an engineer, a mechanical engineer. So I asked the guys on board, the electricians, can I borrow, like your multimeter? Give me a little guidance. I'll figure this thing out. And I fixed this amp. I felt so good. I said to myself, I'm going to build a Dumble. And so that was the plan. And my plan was, I've always thought of things this way. I want to build a Dumble. How do I get there? We start small. I build a pedal. I build a bigger pedal. I built my first pedal, didn't work. Built my first 20, didn't work. Like, I'll get this. And by the time I built one that worked, I was hooked. And I just never looked back. I've been building pedals for 10 years before I built that amp. But I did get there.
But you did get to the amp.
Yeah.
So
and I was Hello Sailor straight away. Like, as soon as I built the first circuit that worked, I said to myself, right, I like doing this, I'm going to do it. And I come up with the Hello Sailor thing back then. That was like 2008, 2009, maybe.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, the actual badge, this badge is a tattoo that I got when I was drunk on deployment. Hello Sailor. I woke up with it. I was like, what the hell? And when I was trying to think of a brand, I was trying to think of something serious like Sailor's Grave, something edgy.
Sure.
But I'm not edgy. I'm not cool. I'm like I'm the clown. So I thought it's got to mean something. And this tattoo just seemed to fit the bill. Yeah.
I love that. And so you've just been building pedals ever since then. It feels like there's been a bigger push recently, at least.
Yeah. Yeah. So I stopped in about 2012.
Mm-hmm.
I completely stopped playing guitar, moved on to, basically career. I want to get promoted in work. So I focused on that. And then 2016, I was out in the Gulf and again on deployment. And my boss said, I'm thinking about learning to play the guitar. I said, I'll learn with you. Hooked back again, found that pedal show. So I was on deployment. I download every YouTube video I could find on that pedal show while we're at sea on watch, in between watches. I watch it and I just got instantly hooked. And by the time I come back, which is like December 2017, It was like 100% committed. Guitar's going to be the thing. Yeah. So it's kind of, that pedal show got me back into wanting to make pedals.
Yeah. And probably just into pedal culture in general.
100%.
I've told this story. It's probably been a couple of years since I told the story of how I got even into doing this. Because originally this was never the intent for the podcast. I wanted to do a podcast about blues music and Mississippi music and focus on, the influence of Mississippi in the grander conversation of music. And most of that comes from, so I told you off here, my background, I have an undergrad in music and audio engineering. Well, the music side of that was what I cared about a lot more than the audio engineering, because by the time I decided on that major, I'd already had a couple of years in a recording industry management program, and I'd already decided that wasn't a field I wanted to work in full time. But the school I was in didn't have a Bachelor of Arts in guitar, so I couldn't focus on guitar as an instrument. So my only route to get the music side of it was to do the dual degree so that I didn't have to focus on an instrument. I could instead take all the music theory and history and performance ensembles I wanted to. And my goal before I ended up in the path I'm on now, I wanted to study musicology and then do a PhD in ethnomusicology. And I'm really fascinated in the sociological and societal roles of blues and jazz music on not only just American culture, but Western musical culture. Man, that was a really long explanation for any of this. But I gigged for a long time and I was in school doing that. And I didn't really care that much about gear. I know listeners, y'all, those of you that have not heard this story before found that to be insane. But
a little bit of me just died there.
Yeah, I didn't care. In fact, for a long time, people would ask me my favorite guitarist and I wouldn't have an answer, because I listened to songwriters more than I did guitarists. And to this day, I was just recently on a live stream with the Studio Rats. We were chatting, and shout out Studio Rats. If you're not watching their YouTube channel, listeners, you really need to be. And someone asked a question of everyone that was on the live stream. It's like, Joe Bonamassa or John Mayer? And like everyone else says Joe Bonamassa. And I'm like, well, if you're going to make me choose between those two, I'm going to go John Mayer. He writes better songs because I care about the songwriting. I don't care about the flashy hot rod guitar playing. It's great. It's fun. And so I didn't care about gear. And then like it was the Wampler Clarksdale pedal because I'm from Clarksdale that it's named for. And so I was like, I didn't know there was a pedal named after my hometown. I'm going to have to buy that. And then I bought that. And then I was like, what else is out there that I have no idea exists? And I too discovered that pedal show that way. And I was like, there's this massive world of guitar pedals and amps and brands I've never heard of that I know nothing about. And then cue the addiction, as it were.
It's so easy. And I have to be careful because I am like I'm self-aware enough to know that I am the ultimate addictive personality. Like if 50% of my brain is on guitar at any given time because I'm addicted to it. I mean, there's worse things to be addicted to, right? So it's not a bad thing. I mean, I try not to go down rabbit holes. I remember I was at that pedal show for one of their experience days. Listeners, if anyone gets the chance to go, pay every penny you can. It was probably the best day of my life outside of marriage and kids.
Yeah.
It was amazing. But they go round in a circle and say, what do you want to get from the day? And everyone says, I want to explore this guitar or this guitar. And I said to Mick, I really like your filming style type thing. I'd love to learn about lighting. And I just seen the fear in his face, like, what are you talking about? That's like, and I was thinking he's going to say, just buy this light, point it this way, good to go. And I was like, can't be that complicated of a subject. And now I've gone down a rabbit hole. I've tried to not get addicted to it. And now I'm sitting around and I'm looking at least 10 different lights that I'll probably never use again that I've gone on my journey with.
Yeah.
And and now I look back, I seen it in his face go, what are you talking about? This is massive. And yeah, so I've got to be careful if I speak it, then I end up going down that rabbit hole. For example, off air, you mentioned Joe Brampton. I'm sat looking at a Trainwreck Rocket amp head. I went down the rabbit hole of building them because I made the mistake of watching something about it and then read something about it. And then Ken Fisher was in the Navy. Oh no, now I'm in trouble. And I went down that road. So I need to know, what caps does he use? What year were they from? Why did he say use Mullard valves only in the rectifier? I need to know everything. And so I went down that rabbit hole. And Joe mentioned he wanted to try one. So I was like, well, I've got one you can have. Brilliant.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have to be very careful what I let myself get obsessed with. And if my wife's watching, that's the last thing I'm going to be obsessed with, I promise.
He's lying. He's absolutely lying.
100%.
And see, I don't have that, which is weird for listeners. I when I was on I was guest on the Tone Mob with Blake Weiland last year sometime, and we actually ended up getting onto this maybe on the Patreon, and it's a little more serious topic, listeners, so I apologize. But just around the idea of addiction, and I have a lot of people in my very, very near family who struggle with addiction of various types, and it's been weird. I've never had those inclinations. Like so many, I've experimented with drugs. I do love bourbon and scotch and good beer, but I also, like I'll go through a kick where I'm like trying a couple of different beers, every week. And then all of a sudden I go 6 months, I don't drink a single thing because it's just, oh, for a brief moment, I want to check this out. And then I'm moving on. The only thing that's ever stuck to a true addictive point for me is guitar. And I explain to people all the time, I'm like, yeah, but this is my only hobby. Like, how many hobbies do you have? And they'll rattle off 2 or 3 or 4 things they do. I'm like, this is it for me. This is what I do. I go to work and I play guitar and I play gigs and I talk about playing guitar and playing gigs. That's what I do.
And not only that, it's quite productive. It's not like it's not harming anyone. It's expensive though.
It is expensive. It's way less expensive than a DUI or
yeah.
So that
definitely, yeah, I'll give you that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I just like to get obsessed, and I like to know. No one can say to me things like, it's just always been that way, or that's the way that it is. So, for example, in working in the Navy, we get a lot of things where they say, we fix this by doing this process here. I'll give an example. So we were out deployed in the South China Sea, or was it? Anyway, we were deployed somewhere hot. I'm in charge of the air conditioning. And our air conditioning units are massive. And there's a big motor on top of them. The motor's broke because one tiny pin on the top is snapped off. But they won't send just a pin. They send the whole motor. Like, what's the point? We have to take all the gas out of the plant, all this other stuff. It's going to take weeks. It costs the Navy thousands. Why can't you send me the pin? Like, because this is how we do it. So I phoned the manufacturer. I got them to send just the pin. It took me like a day to, like one electrical connection that it kind of, the windings attached to it and it sits in the gas. So yeah, obviously it's a, an environmental hazard, but it's just that pin rather than changing a machine this big. Fine. And they were like, yeah, but we always do this. I went to high up command through like the supply chain, and they're like, no, chief, this is the way that we do it. Like, why? Well, we've always done this. So we always pay, I think it was something like £32,000 for this bit of kit and then ship it halfway across the world when we could pay £12 for this other thing and that would fix it. And they're like, yeah, but you're not seeing the point, chief. This is how it works. Like, why? I need to know. I need to know the inside out of it. Tell me that there's a courier that can't do it. I need to know. And I've approached guitar that way too.
I love that. And so I'm a little like that at work in my job. I have staff and I've told them very often, don't come to me and say we need to do something some way because we've always done it that way. And also, I'm not going to come to you and say the same thing. If you don't understand why we're doing something a certain way, ask why. I want you to know. I've actually got this whole like stupid thing training I'm working on to present to other people that work in my field called creating a culture of why, and creating an atmosphere in which people are empowered and willing to ask why without feeling like they're attacking someone or being attacked. Just asking why is because I want to understand. And some people need to understand why you're doing something a certain way.
So in the Navy, we have this weird thing where when you join up, they try and strip you of everything, so then you're malleable. For example, if there's a fire, someone has to tell you to go into that fire and you have to not question it. But if you don't trust the person who's telling you that it's for a good reason. For example, if they always say to you, because I've told you so, you're not going to trust them. When the proverbial hits the fan and you have to go and put your life in danger, you're not going to do it. Whereas I've always been very open with my guys and said, for example, another example, apologies to everyone. It's all going to be Navy because that's all I know. During COVID, we were at sea, fully spanned up ship, at sea, bombed up, ready to go, full ship's company, and our commitment ended early. And so they were like, yes, we're going home early. And the captain was like, no, we're going to Gibraltar. And everyone's like, we don't want to go to Gibraltar and get drunk and stuff. We want to go and see our families. And everyone's kicking off and, you have all, you know what it's like? It's like a culture thing. If one person starts moaning, who's a bit of a character, another. And really all that needed to happen was the captain to sit down everyone and say, we're not going home because we're a fully qualified warship. If we don't go into Gibraltar and have some time in the sun and get drunk, we're going to go somewhere bad and maybe track a Russian warship or do something really terrible. But no one's telling the guys that. So I would sit my team down and say, this is why. And they're like, oh, we understand, chief. So then when bad things happen and I say, go and put your life in danger, they're like, the chief's got a good reason. He wouldn't tell us otherwise. And you've got to build that culture up over time.
Yeah, it takes a long time, and you've got to, and it takes some people not asking when you have to come back to them and say, you need to ask me this. Like, I don't want you to just sign off on anything. It's a really valid point that I found has worked in every aspect of my life. Be willing to ask why, and then also be cautious of the people who don't want you asking why. I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to go there.
Yeah, 100%. If you're correct and you're telling someone something, challenge is good because that means you get to tell them why you're right. And then everyone is better from it because 100%. Next time it happens, they know what's coming.
And I'm up front all the time and I tell them, and when I tell you why, you may still disagree with me, but at least you'll know my reasoning and why we're doing something. Because ultimately someone has to make the decision, right? And exactly. But also I'm very upfront when I make the wrong one. And so that builds that trust too. Because I'm going to make wrong decisions. We all are. We're all going to do something.
Well, of course.
We go back and we're like, yeah, should have taken door B for that one.
If you think you haven't made a wrong decision, you're not looking at yourself properly.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
100%.
That
I
or
mean,
you don't make any meaningful decisions ever. Because, yeah, it's just one of those things. So hopping back to guitar pedals though, so you thought originally I'm going to build pedals, then because you want to build amps. So like you
I
thought
just
that's
wanted to
where
build one amp just for
just
me.
one.
Just one point-to-point wired, nice expensive amp that I built, and then that's me. I'll play guitar. And so I'm really terrible at playing guitar. Everyone who's seen any of my videos will know that I do this big build video, and at the end there's like 3 seconds of me strumming a G chord, done, because I'm not very good at playing guitar. Fine. And I really, really struggled with not being good at it, because if you listen to most podcasts or look on the forums, they'll say, Jared, what's his name, from Kingsley Amplifiers?
Yeah,
Jared,
Simon Jarrett.
Simon Jared. So amazing at playing guitar. He's got an ear for how it's meant to sound. And everyone's like, well, he plays well, so he knows what he's doing. I am terrible at playing guitar. And I used to say to myself, practice for an hour, then you're allowed to build guitar pedals. And then after watching that much that pedal show, Nick come out with something brilliant. He just said, just do what makes you happy. Like,
Yeah.
well, building guitar pedals makes me happy, and maybe that's what I can offer to the world. Then I started focusing more on that and just saying, I don't need to be good at playing guitar.
No.
As long as I know how to make a good guitar pedal.
Famously, anyone who says that you've got to be a good guitar player to understand what it's supposed to sound like, one, isn't familiar with very many basketball coaches, because you'll notice like there's a bunch of former players that coach now, but there's an awful lot of championship winning coaches who never played or couldn't play well. They just understood the game. But also, I mean, there's a poster child for not having to be good at it in Leo Fender. Everyone
100%.
knows the story. He was an engineer. He was not a guitar player, yet he built and created some of the most iconic guitar sounds that we've ever heard.
And being in the Navy, I would say Roger Mayer.
Yeah, like absolutely.
But in my mind, because you heap all this pressure on yourself, right?
Right.
Especially if you're going to be a public person, well, first of all, I didn't know I could be a public person because the military, I didn't know if I'm breaching some sort of code or what. Who knows? Yeah. I probably said a lot of stuff that would get me in trouble with the military, especially from some of the components, but I'm sure we'll get to that.
Yeah.
But I used to think, I keep myself back. And then it was actually Brian Wampler, when he was the indie guitarist, he said something about like, you're not trying to sell guitar pedals, you're trying to make friends. And you're not trying to like build your brand. You're just trying to be a part of the scene. And when I learned that, it was just like, that's it. I'm not making friends. Some people will message me, email me for like weeks talking about a pedal and then apologize for not buying one. Like, no, mate. We weren't talking because you're buying a pedal. We're talking because it's gear and I love it.
That's it.
If you buy a pedal, great. If you don't, I'm going to help you. I don't care.
Yeah. Well, and just to put it into another text, like to put the spin on it and how I'm not saying this as a pitching or selling point, although I do use this as a pitch or sales point. It's just a human nature thing, right? We want to get to know people, and those people relationships can influence the decision of who I go with for certain things. I do it all the time. So I get approached by some brands to come on the podcast, right? And if I get approached, I tell them the exact same thing every time. So, listeners, here's your behind the curtain moment. And brands, here you go. If you want to be on the podcast sometime, one of the things I tell them is, I'd love to have you on the podcast. I just need you to know that when you come on, we'll talk about the gear, but hearing about who you are and your stories and your experiences are more important to me for coming on the show than what you make. We'll absolutely talk about it because that's part of the thing. But the point of this podcast is not to sell your product. It's to find out who you are as a person and as a human being in this space, and building the community around that. And that has meant that I have gotten some really great guests. That also means some really great brands haven't been on this podcast because
really?
That's all they wanted was a sales pitch.
So yeah, that's insane to me. So I would make YouTube videos just for the love of it.
Yeah.
If there was no money involved, because, well, who wouldn't want to talk about guitar gear? And I don't have anyone local who's as obsessed as me. So some of my best friends in the world are through just talking gear.
Yeah.
It's just what happens.
I've made some of my best gear talking friends from doing the podcast. Like, there's a Discord that's associated with this podcast. It's free to join. You don't have to be a Patreon, anything. You can just go over there, and we have some great conversations over there about gear. It's a weird split of active members right now between Americans and European and Brits, and so it means like, oh, well, I know this evening as I'm getting close to bedtime, these folks will be around for this conversation. And then, so, but yeah, same thing. I've made most of my gear talk friends through doing this podcast because I don't have anyone locally as obsessed as I am. And it can be lonely if you're like, nobody wants to talk to me about the thing I love the most in this world. And there's nobody.
But, so I try and talk to my wife. Like, I recently come across some NKT military spec transistors, like 700 of them. They were not cheap. My wife sees my business account and I bought them and I got all excited and I'm trying to explain to her. And she just looked me dead in the eye and was like, you're a geek. Like, yeah, okay. She has no clue what I'm talking about. It's like, it's a lonely living.
My wife has recently started playing guitar.
Wow.
And she has slowly become like in the know of these things. She hears me talk about them, or she overhears a YouTube video I'm watching, and slowly she started to become knowledgeable about all these things. And then she was finally just one day, actually, maybe I told this story on the podcast. We went to see Cardinal Black when they came to Nashville last year.
So good.
That's so good. And we've already got tickets to see him again in Nashville coming up. But the band that opened for them was spectacular as well. And their guitarist, now I need you to understand, my wife and I have been together since 2011, dating and then married. And I have been a guitarist that entire time. She's always been surrounded by guitarists, maybe not as many as now, but it took going to that show and the opening band. The guitarist was playing this Gibson ES335 in matte black. It was like a satin black that I know they made for a limited time. And she saw that guitar and she looked at me and said, I want to play guitar. It's like, are you serious? That's what it took? So recently we've discovered they make an ES339, the smaller bodied version of it, because she's tiny. And so she's like, oh no, there's the one I want. And we pulled some money, got her a guitar. She started playing because she didn't want to play any of mine. Obviously, I'm like, you can pick up any guitar in here. I don't care. She wanted her own. So
that makes sense.
It does. It
That's fantastic.
Sense. Yeah. So I do get to talk to my wife a little bit about guitar.
But she'll get more obsessed than then. On a side note, Cardinal Black, Chris Book, what a guy. So when I come back from the aforementioned deployment in 2017, I didn't realize that these people were like, I mean, you could call them famous, I suppose. Chris Book, that pedal show, Dan and Mick. I had no clue because I'd started watching them from the beginning when they were in like a shed, or Chris was just starting his YouTube channel or whatever. And so I made them all pedals, send them pedals out like, oh, that's good. I'm going to make friends with these guys. They're going to be really into my stuff. I'm starting out, they're starting, whatever. Not at all. Because they're both, well, anyway, a couple of months later, Chris got back to me. And he's like, I love the pedal. Thank you very much, mate. At which point I'd already realized I'm now talking to a superstar in the making type thing. Like, thank you, Mr. Book. That, whatever. I'm a massive fan of his music and his older bands. And he said, I'm going to use it on some stuff. I'll let you know. And I was like, great. Cheers. No expectations whatsoever. Months and months go by. And then he sends me a message and says, buy Guitarist Mag this month. And I was like, okay. He's in Guitarist Mag talking about his gear and his band and my pedals on his board and reading through the bit. You've got to imagine, I'm still building these on my wife's kitchen table at this point.
Right.
So I'm like really sort of, my whole world's in a tiny little box. I pull it out, get me soldering. It was very, very cottage industry. And here's my name, Joe from Hello Sailor Effects built me this. It's an explanation of the pedal in Guitarist Mag. And I was just like, he did not need to do that. I had no right to ever be in Guitarist Mag at that point. Like, what a guy. And then a couple of months later, he gets hold of me and says, I'm going to be on that pedal show again. Could you make me a smaller version quick? And I'll put it on my board for that. Like, yes, I will. Okay. And, what a guy. He didn't have to do that for me.
No.
I was nobody. I still am nobody, really. But, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but he's the nicest dude. Like,
100%.
I've not met him directly, shared a couple of messages. Obviously, I want Chris to come on the podcast at some point.
That would be amazing.
That's it on the plan. Chris, if you're a listener, I don't know, he consumes guitar media, all over the place. Chris, hit me up. Come on the podcast. So, but yeah, he's that genuine about it. I think that comes out. He might be, no, there's one ahead of him, but he's probably in my top 3 current gigging guitar players.
Can I say 2 of my top 2, and I bet you they're in yours?
Well, yeah,
Chris Buck and Joey Landreth.
Yeah, they are. It's those 2, and now after seeing him live, Mark Lettieri.
Really?
So at NAMM this year, they did the PRS 40th anniversary event. And so I had an invitation to that. And so I went. It was the loudest concert I've ever been to, by the way. The loudest. In fact, that's what these are. They were handing these out at the door. These are earplugs. And literally, Paul comes on and says one word into the PA. It's the first sound we've heard through the PA. I immediately grabbed these like, yep, I know why they gave these at the door. But it was watching. So the first half was like a band that backed a bunch of different artists. Then they had an intermission. And then Mark Lettieri's band was the band for the rest of the evening. It was like him, and then Philip Sayce came on. And then I think there was somebody else just before, and then John Mayer, right? There may not have been. It may have been only those 3. But watching Mark Lettieri live and watch him do what he does, I didn't give him enough credit for how good he is. Just absolutely blew my mind how spectacular a guitarist he is. Not only how good he is as a soloist, but how good he is at making other people sound good. And that's just such a spectacular skill as a guitarist. And I came away with a newfound respect. I always liked Mark and his music, but seeing him live is a totally different experience.
Yeah. It's make or break, isn't it? When you're when you see someone live, some bands just it doesn't work.
Yeah. So some bands, the studio stuff, I've come away, been like, it's fine. Go see them live, and I'm like, holy shit.
Well, famously, Oasis, they couldn't get their first recordings right because they couldn't capture that live magic, could they?
Yeah, it's probably because
I've got tickets to see them, by the way.
State. Do you really?
So I'm going on the very last day with Todd from the Guitar Knobs podcast. He's flying over. So he said to me, dude, any chance of trying to get tickets? And I was like, mate, of course I'm trying. And my wife actually spent maybe 2 weeks on the phone or whatever, and she got me tickets for my 40th. Unbelievable. So I'm excited.
I would love to go see that. That would be, so for me, that would be like, I'm trying to think of what U.S. band. Well, my favorite band for a long, long time was the Black Crowes. And back when they announced they were getting back together in like 2005, 2006, something like that. And they got back together, and I went and saw them live at New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival. And so I went and saw them during that festival, and they were fine, but they had not brought back Steve Gorman, the drummer, yet from my favorite 3 albums. And then they did get him back, because I'll be honest, at that one in New Orleans, Chris Robinson spent half the show turning around yelling at the drummer how to play the songs. I'm not lying. I'm not lying and making that. He's a great drummer. I'm not downing his ability as a drummer, but he was trying to step into one of the foundational members' shoes and play these songs that guy helped write. Sometimes it's hard.
A different thing.
And so, but then Steve Gorman came back, and I was like, I need tickets. And in fact, to this day, if that original lineup got back together, I'd fight for those tickets.
Definitely. I just sold my house to get the Oasis tickets.
Oh my gosh, I bet.
100%. It's a no-brainer for me. And it's even better
because in the US, I don't feel like they had the impact in the US the way they did in the UK.
So Oasis come out when I was like leaving primary school and going to senior school. So we're talking like 10 years old. So they were like the band for most of my young life.
So let's see, I've got 3 or 4 years on you, I think. And so I would be like 13, 14. Yeah.
So I'm 14.
Yeah, I'm 44. So
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
good. My
So
math works.
you're just before all of that, yeah. But
Yeah.
I like my first tape that I ever had. Well, actually, my first tape was the Eagles because it was my dad's tape that I stole.
That's a great
I
first tape.
love the Eagle and ELO, another band that I listened to just because I had no other music in the house
Yeah.
and my dad listened to it. But the first band or the first music that I ever had for me was I really wanted the first Oasis album, not the first one, the second. What's the story? I wanted it so bad, and my mum, her friend's kid, had bought the tape, and she managed to copy me one. Brilliant, and I wore that thing out. Let me tell you. And so Oasis have just been my, the pinnacle for me.
I get it.
And now I'm going to see them live. I got to see Queen live, obviously not with the main man himself.
But
it's not the same.
That'd still be incredible. See, I have this aversion, and my wife hates this because she loves stadium shows and she loves arena show. I have this aversion to them to the point that like there's a band she really, really badly wants to see, and at this point they're only playing arenas and bigger. And she was very upset with me when I said I would not go. So I've conceded. I'm going to go see them because she's also got upset. We were watching Ted Lasso. I've discovered the show Ted Lasso, which has also meant that I apparently now like Premier League football. So there's a whole thing going on in my life. But they showed this shot of, I think, Wembley. They were playing at Wembley. And I was like, I want to see a show there. She's like, I thought you hated stadium shows. I do hate stadium shows, but I want to see certain iconic venues. And so, because that's where bands like that played, you hear the incredible stories from those kinds of things. Like, I want to go see a show at the Hollywood Bowl when I normally wouldn't care for that size of a show kind of thing.
Well, I'm actually going to Wembley in June, July. Oh, I forgot the date now. June or it may be June to see Linkin Park. So left field. So a guy I work with is massive into Linkin Park, and I just got Oasis tickets, and I was like, love and light. And he was like, well, I'm going to buy these tickets. And then he bought 2 tickets. He's like, oh, I don't know who I'm going to go with. And I was like, me, live music, I'm in.
That's it. That's 100% it.
Yeah.
So Joe, before we get too far in here, let's actually talk about what you build. We're like, we're almost 3/4 of the way in. We talked about the fact that you build pedals. So talk about, because you do these bespoke things. They're not too standardized. I mean, the circuits, you know what you're building, but
yeah,
especially early on, you were just like, here's the components I found. I decided they'd make this. Here's this pedal.
Yep. So early on, it started that I was trying to just find anything on the internet to build, which I inadvertently messed up, because instead of doing the right thing, I would say normal components, build a pedal. And then you'll have something that works great. And then you can step up to like vintage components, which are notoriously hard to use. They don't always work. You've got to know how to test them. The leads are thicker, so you've got to have a hotter soldering iron. I didn't know any of this. I was just like, I want vintage capacitors because I'm a vintage guitar nut. And so I'm going to buy them. I had no way of testing them. And nothing I ever built. I think I built 20 pedals before one worked. And the first one that worked was like, I think it was a Rangemaster. And I was like, in fact, I'm looking now at the 3rd pedal I ever built over there. A guy owned it for all of this time. 2008, he bought it off me, and he swapped me it for a new one. And he's like, "Are you sure?" And I was like, "Yeah." But anyway, I was just building anything I could find, and then if it worked, great. If it didn't, in the bin it goes, and I'll build another one. Yeah, and I was coming up with some weird names for them. Like that one's called the Double Doll Face Fuzz. It's not even a fuzz; it's an overdrive. It's just mad. If people want to see a funny one as well, if you search on the internet Guitar Jar magazine and The Demon, that was my first ever magazine review. And in the review, it says that I was selling them for $29.99. That's how much they were going for then. And I know, it was just, it was crazy. I don't even think the Guitar Jar is a thing anymore.
The website is still up. The video is unavailable. I decided to Google it there while we're chatting.
Cool.
Yeah, it's yellow, it looks like.
Yeah.
I'm not finding it. There it is. There's a full picture of it.
So that was like one of the very first ones. I painted that on board HMS Monmouth in 2008, maybe 2009. And then I sent it to them guys and they had it for a while. And
so you're actually building while deployed on a ship.
So up until the last 18 months to 2 years, I do 3 years at sea on a ship, like attached to a ship, then 6 to 18 months in a shore job and then back to sea for 3 years and on and on. And now I've completed my 22-year service. I was due to leave the Navy in February, and they're running out of experienced people because everyone's dying off or leaving.
Yeah.
There's a lot
or
of
leaving
alcoholics
when
in the
as soon as
Navy.
they're done with their service.
Or leaving it before they're done. And so they offered me another 2 years, but still at the desk job I'm in. And, I can still do pedals. And then by day, I'm, earning a bit of money to get by. And technically, I'll be a pensioner the second I leave. So I get my full pension and stuff. So
That's
guitar
awesome.
it all the way then. But, so I would build them at sea, to get back to the point.
Yeah.
And usually I write in where the ship is and what I'm doing. So I think Dan mentioned on the show once, we were in the Arctic tracking a Russian, what's the class of ship they are, the missile, but the same as the Moskva. I can't remember what the class is now. Anyway, we were being tracked by one of them going through the Arctic, and I wrote in there being tracked by a whatever, I forget the name of the ship that I was tracking us. And he was like, what the hell? But now I can't write anything cool in them.
Right, you're at a desk.
So I'm basically in the Navy's university where they train engineers. So
Gotcha.
Not exciting.
Made while I should have been grading papers, or or at least recording the grades.
Well, any of my followers will know the video that I'm referring to now. That same Arctic trip, we had some real problems with our ship. We sprung a few leaks, shall we say, and I was filming myself building a pedal for one of my first YouTube channels. And the general alarm goes off and you flood, machinery space flood, everyone's panicking, there's all this going over. And at the end of the pipe, the end of the broadcast, I look at the camera and say, oh, well, they messed that pipe up. I hope we don't sink. Turn the camera off, run down the machinery space, get wet trying to plug up holes, come back to build my pedal. And I've got that on video. It's brilliant. I know, it's mad.
Yeah, that's just madness. I love that. I love that that's how it got going. Honestly, man, it's such a crazy story though, to go from, and I thought I was a bit of a troublemaker kid, but to go from your loftiest ambition was essentially to be a low-level drug dealer, to going in the Navy, to learning electronics, and then to, doing a career in the Navy and then building these super rad fuzz and treble booster, and I don't even know what all you've built. But again, because so much of it is bespoke, you may have built a couple of these and sold them, and I didn't even know you built that.
It's like an evolving thing. So I have I kind of think of them as food groups. So I've got my Kossoff drive, which is one of my overdrives, an Anchor drive, which is it's an overdrive, but it does transparent boost. And I don't want to do a talk through of every pedal, but I'll have these food groups where it's I'll have my Abbey Road Fuzz, which is my fuzz pedal. And then I'll do variations of that. What happens if I tweak it for more gain? What happens if I tweak it for more cleanup? What happens if I find these really rare transistors that I can work into it? And it's like a variation of that. And if you look back through my pedals, you can kind of see where my procurement habits went. So I'm looking at some circuits now where there's certain transistors on there, capacitors on there that I've got now. In 10 years' time, I'll look back and go, I wish I had them again, but there'll be something else. And But what I like about it is if someone buys one of my pedals, even old ones, and they're like, it doesn't work with my rig, I wish it did this, then all I have to do is get in touch and it's all moddable, or, we can make it work type thing. Or if someone was to say, Joe, I really like this, but I'd love it if I had something else. I had a guy get in touch with me at my last guitar show who said he worked on the Royal Navy's Trident program, which is on nuclear missiles. And he said, I work for a business that sold transistors to the Navy for this program. I want a pedal with them transistors in. Can we try and source them? So it can be, because he was testing the batches before they go out. He said, wouldn't it be cool if we found a serial number that I know that I tested? Amazing. So things like that. I'm interested in things like that. So
that's so cool. That's what a way to have something made for you that not only is made for you, but it has a tie to you. You're instantly connected to it. Not just you like the way it sounds. It's a cool pedal. I have so many pedals that I'm if I ever need to sell that, I can buy another. It's no big deal.
100%.
We think about most of the stuff that way, but that kind of story, there's no replicating that.
Yeah. I've had some weird ones, and the world works in some weird ways. Back in maybe 2010, 2011, the ship I was on was tasked to go and save a submarine off the top of Scotland. We told the Canadians one of our submarines. They left a hatch open. A wave had come in, caused a fire, killed a few people. They were out drifted at sea. It was horrific. We've been at sea for a long time at this point, and then we were literally, you could see land. I'm going ashore. I'm getting off the ship, and then we got turned around to go and save them. And afterwards, we went to a wake on board one of their warships, the St. John's. You know, we drink their moose milk. I don't know if you've ever tried moose milk.
No.
The Canadians make it. It's, you know, I made some good friends there anyway. 20 years later, I get a guy from Canada get in touch and say, I'd love to have this pedal made. It's a, commemorative of my time in the Canadian Navy. You were in the Navy, all this stuff. And he starts telling me about the ship that I was drinking on. And that guy was on the ship at the same time. So, but obviously I don't know him. I never, right. I was
There's
just
a lot of people on these ships.
Yeah. And also I was like the lowest of the low at that point. I was like 19 years old or something.
Yeah.
No, younger, 18 maybe. And, but we were both at the same, and he's like, oh, do you remember the church for the wake? Yeah, I went to the church in my uniform. He's like, really? And well, I was on the St. John's, and I said, well, I was very drunk on the St. John's. Maybe we were in the same place. Funny story that because I'm quite an eccentric person. I like to talk to people. I'm very outgoing. And that whole do would be like Navy here, Canadian Navy here, maybe some people talking there, and then me going around everyone and whatever. And at one point I got so drunk and I was speaking to this officer, and usually the peasants like me wouldn't be speaking to someone so high ranking. It turns out I've got this officer and I'm, telling him what for, but it was the captain of the submarine. And someone had to like peel me off and say, Joe, come on, mate, down the mess you go. You've had too much to drink. This guy don't need this today. Like, what? He's my best mate or whatever. No, he's just come from an ordeal.
Yeah, he needs a little space right now.
But it's very weird that whole situation turned into 20 years later. Someone halfway across the world wanted a pedal to do with that.
Yeah, to do with that event. That's really...
I think the submarine was called the Chicoutimi, something like that. Yeah, if anyone wanted to see the event, it was horrific.
It's these connections and these interactions why I love the guitar community just in general.
Absolutely.
We all have this shared love, this shared obsession, and we get to connect as people, and I think it builds great communities, and that's the whole reason I do this podcast. That's why you're building and doing this thing, because you love the folks that are in it, and that's really a lot of why I have these conversations and keep doing this podcast. I like hanging out and talking to folks, getting to know and have these connections. Now all over the world, I have people that share. We talk about all our favorite guitarists. We fight about who's the better guitarist. There's no better, I know, but it's a fun fight to have.
There's no better, but Paul Kossoff's the best.
Oh, we're gonna fight, Joe. Actually, I don't have a best. Remember, I told you you asked me my favorite guitarist. I'd be like, I don't know. I like songs. I did eventually settle on Jeff Beck, but
it's hard to argue with any of the greats, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've got a question though.
Okay.
Well, if everywhere you go, when you try a piece of gear, if you go into a music shop, is there a riff or a certain thing that you play that lets you know what that guitar amp gear is going to sound like? Because every guitarist I've found so far, or every builder, there's one riff that you go and you play it and you're like, I know how this gear is going to react with me.
Yeah. I don't know about an individual riff, but I have this thing I do. I'm not going to try to grab a guitar. I was going to maybe try to grab a guitar. I'll show you during the break. I'll show you exactly what I mean. But I do have this. It's very simple. It's like this. The way I play, it's very blues based. There's a lot of Americana in there. There's a lot of some classic rock and some country in there, but it's mostly blues. I grew up, hardcore, Muddy Waters, Albert King's, B.B. King. But there's this pick, not scrape, but a rake. A scrape is like where you slide it up the string. Rake is like when you slide and mute all the strings at the same time, and you just land on a minor third, and then there's a blues lick that follows. That's it. That's my riff. I will know if a piece of gear can do the things I want it to do if it sounds good playing that lick.
And everyone, whether you know it or not, everyone has got one.
Mm-hmm.
One of them little riffs that you go to. Mine's "I Butcher Brown Sugar" by ZZ Top.
Hey,
if I played it, you wouldn't know what it was, but I know. And you can pick softly in some parts of it, and then when you dig in, if it jumps out and like barks at you type thing, I know it's going to do the thing, right?
Yeah.
So,
I could think of a couple of their ZZ Top songs are really good for that would tell me everything I need to know. Actually, I know it's stereotypical, but LaGrange is really good for it because it's got that really like hammering in that part. But then you go to the break before the guitar solo, that's just a little bluesy turnaround. It's almost clean sounding. So if you can do those two things, it's pretty indicative.
Yeah, I love that.
Well, awesome. Well, Joe, we're actually coming close to the end here, and we still have more to talk about your pedals and your building process and the things you do, but we're going to do that over on Patreon. Listeners, you know the drill. You can listen to any of the extra episodes over on Patreon. $5 a month gets you all the bonus content that I put out. Additionally, if maybe you just wanted one episode of the Patreon, but you didn't want to subscribe to Patreon, totally understand. You can actually go over to patreon.com/40watt podcast and you can just buy that one extra episode instead of subscribing to the Patreon. It's a new thing I added. And listeners, I haven't mentioned this in a while. If you subscribe to Patreon through the app on your Apple device, don't do that. Open a browser, go to patreon.com/40watt podcast. It'll be cheaper. What'll happen is Apple is treating things done in the app as an app purchase, and they tack on their like 30% on top of that. So don't do that. Don't do it that way. Go to a browser, patreon.com. Joe, tell us where all we can find you on the internet.
So hellosailoreffects.com is my website, or if you're going to get in touch, Instagram, because I try to zone out of everything else, otherwise I can talk for England. So keep it on Instagram if you want to get hold of me.
All right. Sounds good. All those links are going to be down below. You can find Joe as well as any of the other links for the podcast, affiliate links, all those things. Y'all have heard me talk about them enough. Y'all, we're going to go over to Patreon. For Joe and myself, please be good to yourselves, be kind to each other, and make some noise.
Cheers.